this video, I want to take a quick look at how No Man's Sky runs when streaming via Airlink to a Quest 2. I'll be focusing on 72Hz, 80Hz and 90Hz settings at the default resolutions as set by the Oculus desktop application. I'll also be showing FPS VR and the Oculus performance overlay on screen at all times, just so you have all the information available to you as we go through this test. I'm using an RTX 3080 based system, but my full PC specs can be found in the description of this video, and I'm also using an AC router on the 5GHz band, so you might find slightly better results if you use a Wi-Fi 6 AX router. I'm using my standard graphical settings as shown here, if you can see past the performance overlays on screen now, but basically I'm running mostly on low settings with a few small exceptions. But with that, let's take a look.
Immersed robot.
Okay, so starting out with 72Hz at the default resolution of 4128 by 2096, I'd just wander around this planet for a while and then take off and just see how it performs when flying around the surface on a ship as well. And we can see that for the most part we do get pretty stable performance at 72 frames per second with a little bit of performance headroom as well, although it does seem a little bit sporadic, and it's the same old story with No Man's Sky. You do get these stutters and these sort of sharp CPU spikes and things like that in this game, which can affect the amount of headroom you got. And when I do the analysis visor, and then you can see a sharp drop in performance there as it goes through, but then it quickly comes back and we're back up to 72 frames per second again. So generally it runs okay. It's the same thing with No Man's Sky that I've mentioned on numerous videos before. Basically you will always get these sort of sharp drops every now and again, and there's not really very much you can do about it. It's the same if you use a dedicated wired PC VR headset or using Airlink as I am here. So this performance actually isn't too bad, and it's running pretty nicely overall, I would say. And it's a very similar story when we move up to 80Hz refresh rate at the default resolution of 3936 by 1984. We can see that we get very similar performance to the 72 frames per second that we were seeing a moment ago. You still get some sharp spikes here and there, and it's sort of a little bit sporadic in places, but generally it can maintain that 80 frames per second for most of the time as we play through this. So both 72Hz and 80Hz are both performing pretty similarly here, and that's probably down to the fact that we're running at a very slightly lower resolution when we up that frame rate to 80 frames per second. But again, it's pretty comfortable and there's not too many issues at all really with running the game like this. and here running at 90Hz with the default resolution of 3712 by 1872, we can see that once again we do get pretty solid performance at those 90 frames per second, but once again you can see the performance headroom is actually running a little bit lower now and a little bit closer to that line where it drops off, and we do drop a few frames here and there in places. Once again, you still get those same spikes that we get on all the settings, so you know, for the most part it's still running pretty well at 90 frames per second, but you will notice that you don't have quite so much performance headroom at this setting. But it's not too much of an issue, and I would comfortably play at 90 frames per second using these settings as well. I would say I'll probably personally opt for a lower refresh rate and just up that resolution very slightly. And finally, I just wanted to drop it back down to 80Hz, 80 frames per second, but this time increasing the resolution to 4704 by 2384, which is 1.2 in the Oculus desktop app. And that's really how I choose to play this game most of the time when running on Airlink. And it runs pretty well for the most part. You can see that the performance headroom, there's not a lot there, so I am running quite close to the margins on this setting. But again, it runs pretty well for the most part, and it's only those occasional spikes that you'll get, and within transitions and loading in assets or scenery, entering a planet or exiting a planet, those kinds of things is where you'll notice most of the performance hits. But we can see here that as we fly around that we're still getting pretty good performance overall. It's maintaining that 80 frames per second for the most part, and it's a very comfortable experience, I'll say. So I like having that slightly higher resolution, just gives that slightly sharper image in this game with Airlink, and it looks fantastic. So a great way to play this game with these settings. But that's pretty much it for this video, just a very quick one to see how No Man's Sky runs using Airlink in the Quest 2, and yeah, it's a nice experience. I do play the game quite a lot with these settings like this, and I still would prefer, I'd still take a wired, tethered PC, dedicated PC VR headset over the Airlink if I wanted to get the absolute best performance and the best image quality, but this is absolutely a great way to play the game regardless. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Please consider supporting Immersed Robot on Patreon, or joining the Discord, or following me on Twitter, or better yet, all of the above. Links in the description below.